the night of October 31st, 1999, 217 people boarded a plane in New York. Half an hour later, every single one of them was gone. A relief pilot, who was not even supposed to be in that cockpit yet, showed up early, and no one stopped him. A captain stepped away for less than 2 minutes, and in that moment, the aircraft was sent into a near supersonic dive. And when investigators tried to explain what happened, two nations looked at the same evidence and came to completely different conclusions. Hosni Mubarak, president of Egypt, once said, "This is the worst air crash in Egypt's history. Really, I was shocked. It's a big tragedy for us. Today, we are going to understand exactly what happened and why, even decades later, the answer still divides the world. But to understand how this disaster unfolded, we need to go back to where it all started. A quiet, late night departure from New York. EgyptAir Flight 990 departed from John F. Kennedy International Airport at exactly 4 a.m. on October 31, 1999. On board were 217 people, a mix of American tourists returning home, Egyptian military officers coming back from training in the United States, and an experienced flight crew trained for long transatlantic journeys. Everything about this flight was routine. The command captain, Ahmed al-Habashi, had spent 36 years with the airline. The cockpit was operating under standard long-haul procedure where one crew handles takeoff and landing, and a relief crew takes over during the cruise phase. Among that relief crew was First Officer Gamal El-Batouti, one of the oldest co-pilots in the airline. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, but sometimes it is not the obvious things that change everything. It is the small details, the ones people almost ignore. So who exactly was Gamal El-Batouti, and why did his presence in that cockpit, earlier than expected, make others uneasy from the very beginning? Have you ever wondered how one person, in the wrong place at the wrong time, can change the course of an entire story? Gamal El-Batouti was 59 years old, nearing retirement. Despite decades of experience, he had never risen beyond the rank of first officer. That alone was unusual. In an industry where progression is expected, remaining in the same role for so long often raises quiet questions. Some colleagues reportedly believed he relied more on past connections than current performance. But on this night, something stood out even more. Just 20 minutes after takeoff, El-Batouti entered the cockpit earlier than scheduled. He approached the active first officer, Adel Anwar, and asked to take over. Anwar was not expecting this. According to the cockpit voice recorder, his response was immediate and clear. "I'm not sleeping." It was a simple statement, but it carried meaning. He was not ready to leave his position. Yet El-Batouti insisted. The exchange became tense. Not loud, but uncomfortable. Eventually, Anwar stepped aside. Think about that for a moment. In a tightly structured environment like a cockpit, where roles and timing are carefully managed, an unexpected shift like this is not just unusual, it is significant. Captain al-Habashi noticed the tension. He attempted to smooth things over, maintaining professionalism. But the moment lingered. Some later speculated that El-Batouti may have wanted to avoid working with the incoming relief captain. Others believed it was simply his personality, a man known for doing things his own way. Respected, yes, but not always aligned with the expectations of younger crew members. And this is where the story begins to take shape. Because being in the cockpit at that exact moment would soon matter more than anyone could have imagined. What happened next? In just a matter of seconds, with the captain briefly away, would push the aircraft beyond its limits and leave investigators searching for answers that still do not fully agree. Picture this. The aircraft is cruising steadily over the Atlantic Ocean. Everything is stable. Everything is normal. And then, in an instant, everything changes. Captain al-Habashi leaves the cockpit briefly. He is gone for less than 2 minutes. In that window, the autopilot is disconnected. Investigators later found no mechanical issue that would explain this action. Greg Phillips, former NTSB investigator, once said, "I found no reason for the autopilot to be disconnected by a fault or failure in the airplane." Moments later, the aircraft begins to descend. This is not a gradual descent. The nose is pushed downward. The engines lose thrust. Speed increases rapidly. Inside the cockpit, there is no standard emergency call, no clear explanation. Instead, one phrase is repeated, "Tawakkaltu ala Allah," I rely on God. It is said again and again and again, 11 times in total. Meanwhile, outside the cockpit, the situation is becoming extreme. Captain Al-Habashi returns quickly, in roughly 16 seconds. He sees what is happening and immediately pulls back on his control column. But something is wrong. The controls are not aligned. One is pushing forward. The other is pulling back. The aircraft responds unpredictably. Bernard Loeb, former director of aviation safety at the NTSB, once said, "It is well understood that in a cockpit of virtually any airline in the world, when a captain comes in and asks a question, the first officer will respond. When the captain asked his questions, Battuti did not respond. There is confusion, there is urgency, but there is no clear coordination. The engines eventually stop producing power. Systems begin to fail. For a brief moment, the aircraft rises again, and then it descends once more. This time, there is no recovery. Radar shows one final movement, and then nothing. The recorders go silent. 217 people are gone. But even after everything that happened in those final moments, the biggest question was still ahead. Because when investigators began examining the evidence, they all saw the same data, but what they concluded from it would divide two nations. So the real question is, how can the same evidence lead to completely different conclusions? After the incident, the United States National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, led the primary investigation. At the same time, Egypt launched its own independent inquiry. At first, both sides worked together, but it did not take long for their interpretations to diverge. The American investigators focused on the flight data and cockpit recordings. Their analysis pointed toward deliberate control inputs made during the flight. But Egyptian investigators saw something different. They proposed a mechanical issue, specifically, a possible malfunction in the elevator control system that may have forced the aircraft into its steep descent. Supporting this theory were three unusually sheared rivets found in the aircraft's structure. This discovery was taken seriously. In fact, global inspections of similar aircraft revealed over 100 sheared rivets across the Boeing 767 fleet, leading to multiple aircraft being temporarily grounded for inspection. Now, this is based on publicly available information and is presented here purely for educational awareness. But even with this finding, the NTSB maintained that the system was designed with redundancy, meaning such a failure should not have caused the sequence observed. And then another layer emerged. Investigators began looking into El Battuti's personal and professional life. One testimony stood out. Captain Hamdi Taha, an EgyptAir pilot, once said, "Battuti had just had these big privileges taken away from him, and he was humiliated." According to this account, El Battuti had recently been informed that this would be his final trip to the United States, removing a long-standing privilege. Even this detail was interpreted differently. Some saw it as significant. Others dismissed it as unrelated. Then there was the repeated phrase, "Tawakkaltu ala Allah." To some investigators, it raised questions, but cultural experts offered a different perspective. Armin Bonar, Egyptian Arabic professor at Georgetown University, once said, "It's a very positive phrase, so it's not the kind of phrase that anyone would be using before they commit a crime or before they commit suicide." And just like that, the same words carried two completely different meanings. This is where the case became more than just an investigation. It became a question of interpretation, of perspective, of understanding. While experts debated what the evidence truly meant, there was another side to this story, one that was not about data or analysis, but about people left behind, searching for closure. While investigators worked through technical details and competing theories, families across the world were facing something far more personal. 217 people had not returned home. They came from different countries, the United States, Egypt, Canada, and beyond. But they shared one reality: unanswered questions. After nearly 2.5 years of investigation, the NTSB released its final report in March 2002. Their conclusion pointed to the Relief First Officer's actions as the central cause. Egypt's Civil Aviation Authority strongly disagreed. They rejected the findings, calling them incomplete and unconvincing. And so, two official conclusions existed, side by side. For the El Battuti family, the story was clear. They believed he acted with professionalism until the very end. For investigators in the United States, the data told a different story. And for the families of those on board, neither explanation fully answered the question of why. The situation also placed strain on diplomatic relations. At one point, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak personally requested that the case not be treated as a criminal matter. At the same time, one outcome did lead to change. The investigation uncovered a genuine structural issue within the aircraft's elevator assembly, prompting inspections and improvements across the global fleet. So even in uncertainty, there was progress. Greg Phillips, NTSB investigator, once said, "When we sign on to be accident investigators, we do it with the idea that we're going to keep the next one from happening, not to cover up one that did." And perhaps that is where the focus ultimately remained. But even today, one question still lingers, not just about what happened, but about who gets to define the truth. EgyptAir Flight 990 remains one of the most debated aviation incidents in history. Not because the facts are missing, because the same facts tell different stories depending on how they are understood. What is certain is this: 217 people did not return home. Families across nations were changed forever. And a hidden flaw in a widely used aircraft was brought to light. But beyond the technical details, this case raises a deeper question. When an event crosses borders, cultures, and perspectives, who decides what really happened? For the El Battuti family, the answer is about honor. For investigators, it is about data. And for the families of those lost, it is about closure that may never fully come. So the next time you hear about an investigation, remember this: the truth is not always just about evidence. Sometimes it is about interpretation, and understanding that difference may be the most important part of all.